Hi, I'm Roger from Juice Bikes, and today we're going to show you how to disinstall and reinstall your controller for a HyperScorpion and HyperScorpion Express. You will need a 5mm Allen wrench, or I use this 5mm side of my Tri tool, side cutters or scissors, and a 10mm socket, and also extra zip ties. Okay, first we're going to start by removing the battery. Always a good idea to remove the battery anytime you're doing any kind of maintenance on your bike. Best thing to do is remove the battery. First, we're going to start by removing the nuts on the bolts here from the seat. There's going to be 2 here up front, and then there's going to be 2 back here. So you have 4 in total that we're going to be removing today. So start with the forward ones. And make sure to save your washer and your nylon lock nuts later. When you reinstall your seat. When we're removing the seat, we're gonna also remove these 2 nuts right here. They're gonna be underneath the frame. Take your 10mm socket, and start loosening them up. After you get all the nuts off, you're gonna be removing the seat. So we're going to start here on the left side of your bike. This is where your motor cable is going to be. And we're going to cut these zip ties here for the motor cable. Carefully cut these, make sure we're not getting into the cables themselves. And then there's some zip ties here for this bundle over here. Get that cut. Those are already cut. Then you're going to pull this up here, and you have this is your motor connection. You're going to unscrew this silver part right here and then pull this out. And bring this down here. And then we're going to pull this cable through this part by the swing arm right there. Best to pull it through. When you do pull it through, kind of in the corner here. That makes it a lot easier to pull it through. So now that we got this out of here, we're going to go over to the next side and then cut some cables over there. Some zip ties on that side too. Now we're going to be cutting the zip ties here that are holding your cable that goes to your torque sensor. So carefully cut these zip ties. And then disconnect the torque sensor, and you can push this through. So, there we go. All right. Okay, so next you're going to pull out this bundle of cables here. This is your XT60 connection to your power, and we're going to cut the zip tie holding this together, and then disconnect it. And then you're going to have to go and find some of your other cables here. So you're going to pull out a bundle of cables here and set that aside. Then we're going to pull, this is to your 5-to-1. We're going to disconnect that. And we're going to disconnect. This is the cable that goes to your front headlight. And all that controls all your flashers and everything else. I'm going to disconnect that. You might have an extra cable that looks like it's unplugged here. This is an auxiliary cable with a red tip on here. Don't worry about it. It's not used. Sometimes that might have a cap on it. Sometimes it'll just be out like that. So now that you got pretty much all your cables are disconnected, now you're going to have to fish in there, but we found here is the cable that we already disconnected from the torque sensor. And then get your hands in there. It's a little tight, but if you can, you'll find the cable for your up here for your motor. connection. We're going to pull that through. There we go. So there's your motor connections out. So all the cables up here are all disconnected. And then next we're going to go to the back here. Next we're going to cut these zip ties that are routing the cable to your tail light. So there's one zip tie there and one zip tie there. And then you're going to disconnect your cable that goes to your tail light. And then now all your cables are disconnected. Next we're going to remove the controller tray. This holds the controller and the DC to DC converter. You can use a 5mm L Allen like this, but I like to use the 5mm side of my tri-tool. It's a little quicker. So we're going to remove these bolts. Okay, make sure to set your bolts aside for later. Now, there's kind of some sticky tape here, so that might be kind of keeping everything still up there. So you're gonna like push down on that. Don't be afraid to push down. Also make sure your key is out of there because it's really hard to get it out with the key still in here, so you don't want the key stuck in the ignition. And now we're gonna pull the whole tray back and then pull out all your cables that you already disconnected. And now your controller tray is out of the bike. Okay, now we have basically here this longer piece. This longer part is your controller. This one's the DC to DC converter, so that's basically all your your tail light and your blinkers are hooked up to this. So we're going to start by getting some of these wires out of the way. You could have like this big bundle of wires here. You can take out any zip ties that are holding that bundle together. And so now this is all out. And what you're going to do is carefully look for whatever ones of these wires here, and this is called your 5-to-2 key switch harness. You're going to disconnect anything that is connected to this part here, the controller. So carefully make sure you grab by here, not by the wires, but by this part of the connections, and then pull on each one. Could be a little tough sometimes. If they are kind of tough to take out, you can actually heat these up with like a hair dryer or a heat gun. Just a little bit of heat will actually make these loosen up and release a lot easier. That. And I think after all these are out, it looks like you have everything disconnected from the controller itself. You can pull the controller out, which can be tricky sometimes. Let's see. Start by getting some of these wires out of the way. Okay, now we got most of our wires disconnected. This can be kind of difficult sometimes just getting the controller out because it's taped onto a heat sink there. You can use a small little flat head screwdriver, kind of gently pry it out. That's what I do sometimes. And we get this out, and then you can just pull the whole controller out. And you can see this heat sink right here. Sometimes it'll be stuck on the bottom of the tray or onto the controller itself. But there is everything out of there, and we're ready to replace the controller. If you are replacing the DC to DC converter, it comes out pretty easily, but you will have to be disconnecting this wire harness here, this 5-to-2 key switch controller. So what you can do is just pull this out right here, push on this tab. And then one caveat is this is your ignition and your connection to your ignition. You want to be really careful to disconnect this. You don't want to pull on these wires too hard here because they are kind of a little bit sensitive to pull. You don't want to pull out the solders here. So be really careful anytime you're disconnecting or reconnecting this right here to your, basically your ignition. But now this is your whole 5 to 2 key switch cable is out. You can also pull your DC to DC converter out also, and then when you're ready to put it back in, you're just going to place it like that and reconnect everything. So now we're going to start by, if you are also replacing your 5 to 2 key switch cable, this can be a little daunting because we got a lot of different connections here. The thing I would always suggest to start with is you have this right here, basically tail end here with the 2, and then you have the 5 here. We're going to start with the yellow connection here on the 2 end, and we're going to put that connection onto the ignition. So find the connection here for the ignition and then put those in. If you start with that first, that would be, you'll have better success of making sure that you get everything connected properly, because that could easily be confused with some other wires that are actually coming out of your controller also. So make sure we get that first when we're redoing the 5 to 2 key switch cable. And after that, these right here, these white connections, we're going to put those back in. Oops, make sure to get this little piece here, that guide through there. There we go. And so that's connected. Also on your DC to DC converter, you have this auxiliary connection here. We do not use that, so don't worry about that. So it's just this little connection. It does not connect to anything. So basically now you have your 5 to 2 key switch harness connected to your DC to DC converter. Also here is this is basically your flasher module. That can also be easily disconnected and reconnected if you want a new flasher module. But this usually will already be connected with your 5 to 2 key switch connection. So, all right. So now we're going to be putting in your new controller. So what I suggest to do is get all your cables through the front here. So here's your motor connection cable. Route it through the front of your tray here before we put the actual controller in. These yellow connections we're going to be hooking to your 5 to 2 key switch cable, so you can keep those out, but also like your XT60 power connection, you want to push that through, and also your 5 to 1 harness connection, you're going to push that through also. And this long connection here is for it's going to go to your torque sensor, so we're going to push that through also to the front. And then you're going to have, so out of your controller, you're going to have these 2 yellow tip 3-pin connections. And you're going to find now now that you have your ignition module or ignition connection already connected, you're going to look on your 5 to 2 key switch cable here, and you're going to have 2 yellow tipped connections also. So one's going to be male and female on each one, so you can find the proper one. So this one, the female connection, the male connection from your controller to here. Make sure to line up you're going to have little arrows on there to line up, and notches also, so line those up, hook that in, and then find the other one that is actually coming from your controller. And now the male connection on the 5 to 2 key switch cable and the female connection on the controller, connect those up. So now that is all connected. And also again, you have this red connection here on your controller. This is an auxiliary connection. It is not used, but it's best to just kind of push it through here, the front also, so it's out of the way. And should have either stuck on your controller itself, this heat sink, or maybe it's on the bottom of your tray here, but we're gonna make sure that's either way on there. And now we're gonna put the controller in here right next to the DC to DC converter. We push it in here, and now your controller's all in. And now you're ready to kind of clean up this bundle of wires here and zip tie it back together and push it into your tray. So now we have this 5 to 2 key switch cable bundle here. So it's best to kind of just bundle it all up like this. And you notice you're going to still have 2 connections. You're going to have this longer one that's coming from this side of 5. This is going to go towards the back. This is going to go to your headlight or your tail light connection. This one here is going to go up forward. So you're going to have from here on this 2 side, this needs to go forward. This is going to connect to the extension that goes to your headlight and all the controlling your headlight, your horn, and your flashers. So what I like to do is, just kind of bundle this all up nice, and then get a zip tie and zip tie these all together, this whole bundle together. And get this all bundled up and kind of get it through here. So now get as much of the wires in as you can, as neatly as you can. Now you have this one here. We want that to go through the opening. So we get that through there. And any other wires are kind of sticking out, we want to kind of get them in there. There we go. And then you can even kind of push this little piece back on here, on your tray, and you can fish this through. This is going to go to towards the back, towards your tail light, and then you can push this back in like that, and then cut your excess here. And the tray is all ready to go and ready to be reinstalled. Okay, so now your tray is all ready to go. You're going to start actually by fishing some of this lines. So you can start with your 2 longest lines, like your cable for your motor connection. We're going to actually bring it up here for right now. And then we're going to get the cable for your torque sensor. And we're going to fish that one through this opening here on the seat tube. And we're going to fish that up too. I'm out of the way for right now. And then we're going to start bringing this tray closer to here. And you still have all these little connections, or the shorter ones. What we're going to do is put those through that opening too also. Okay, so we're making sure we get all these cables into this opening here. And grab them by your hand, bring them up. So we want everything that we can get in here before we mount this tray. It'll make it a lot easier later to reconnect everything. So we like to get all this in there before we start mounting the controller tray back onto the frame. And then make sure also we get the connection here for your XT60 into here. And this can be a little fussy. You got so many connections going through here. Just get them as many as you can through there and pull them up out of the way. And let's see. There, that's in there. Okay, so now we're ready for the tray to be installed onto the frame. Okay, now we got all the cables in there. We're gonna mount this tray. There might be this little rubber piece underneath on the frame here, so that's fine. That helps to kind of keep everything together in there. So you're gonna line up the little holes right here to these holes right here on the frame, and you're gonna start just by hand. They could be a little difficult at first, but get them started by hand. Hit one in, go. And then we're going to take our 5mm Allen hex, and we're going to start tightening these down. We just want to make sure everything is snug, not over tightened, but just snug. I would say just enough so this won't come loose later. Check them all. All right, and now you're ready to reconnect all your cables. So now we're going to start by reconnecting all these cables here that are coming out of your seat tube. I suggest before we fish the motor cable and your cable that goes to your torque sensor, it's best to get these all connected first so they don't get shoved down later. So we're going to start here with the 5-to-1 connection, and make sure you line everything up here. There's like some arrows on there, but they're kind of hard to see, but there's notches. Get that on there. Then we have your XT60 here, your power connection. Hook those up. Grab a zip tie and push that through right here between these cables here. Want to make sure that that doesn't get disconnected at some point, so this helps to keep it connected. Cut the excess, and then you're going to look for this one here, this black 6-pin connection, and then you're going to find probably way down in here, you're going to have that, should have that connection coming out, and we're going to hook that up. That's your extension to your headlight and your horn and all that, and your flashers. And so once we get all those done, again, you have this red tip, it's just an auxiliary, you don't have to worry about it. Once these are all connected, now we can start by fishing these through. So I would suggest starting with the motor cable, and we're going to push this down into the frame, kind of grab all the cables out of the way, and then start pushing this down into this seat tube here. And then we're going to try grabbing it out of the opening on the bottom here of the seat tube. So then we probably go down to that. All right, let's get this, I'll get it as close to as possible before we, because it might take, this is like, all right, so we're going to fish this motor cable down through here. Can be kind of hard. You're going to get your fingers in there, might take several tries, but you're going to try to grab that motor cable that we just fished up from the top down, and then once you get it out of there, out of that opening, you're going to pull as much as you can of it out of the way, and then we're going to put it in between this area right here. As you see, you don't want to try, it's too hard to get through here, so you want to come straight down through here in this little corner right there. And there we go. And now that's going to be ready to be hooked up into your motor. Now you have your cable for your torque sensor, and we're going to push this down, and we're going to push it down into the seat tube and also fish that one out from the bottom opening. We'll fish this through here, this opening here. This is the one for your torque sensor. I'm going to fish that through, and pull it out, then we're going to put it through here. And now that one is ready to be connected also. So now that we got the connection for your torque sensor fished through, we're going to make sure you line up the notches. Also, sometimes this could be black tipped also. So they're not always green tipped. Sometimes this part will be black tipped. This will usually be green tipped though. Connect that in,
And now we're ready to put our zip ties into there. Any excess that you have also, just you can shove it back up into the seat tube. So you don't want a lot of excess coming out. Now we're going to zip tie these in. This is the cable for your rear derailleur, so make sure that's in there too. These on. And anytime you're zip tying these cables, just need to be kind of tight, but we don't want to overdo them. You risk pinching the actual wires inside if you over tighten these, so they just need to be tight enough to hold everything. Don't need to over tighten anything. And there you go. So now your torque sensor is all reconnected. Now we're going to connect our motor cable back up. So push this through, grab this right here, and make sure you line up. Basically, you have like 3 pieces here that you can see, 3 connections. You want to make sure you line them up. All right. Push these together. Turn this, make sure it's tight. There we go. Put the zip ties on here. All right. I'm going to re-zip tie all this together. Okay, then we're all set there with your motor cable. Okay, and now you have this bundle of wires coming out of here. So that's the last one. You want to kind of zip tie, keeps everything nice and clean. There we go. And the last connection you're going to make is to your tail light here. So you're going to line these up, hook that in, and then you have underneath, you're going to have 2 mounts here where we're going to zip tie these little mounts here, little channels kind of like that will help you keep this wire out of the way so it won't be flopping down. Get that one. And cut off all the excess. And again, don't over tighten these. Just enough to hold everything in place. Any extra that you have, you can kind of get it out of the way, but there it is, all set to go now. So before we put the seat back on, I suggest testing everything. So we're going to put the battery back on. Turn the battery on. Put your key into the ignition. And then turn the bike on. Make sure the bike is turned on. Make sure your headlight, your flashers, and you can tip the bike onto the kickstand a little bit. Make sure the motor's working. Check your rear tail lights. Make sure those are working also. This just makes it easier in case something didn't connect right or whatever. You don't have to take the whole seat back off again. But after that, after you're sure that everything's connected properly, turn the bike off, turn the battery off, and now you're ready to get the seat back put on. Now that we're satisfied everything is properly hooked up, we can kind of push this bundle of wires down in here, kind of out of the way. You know, we don't want them sticking out too much. So kind of get everything down in there. And now we're ready to put the seat back on. So make sure you line up. So you have the 4 bolts here. You have 4, 1, 2, 3, 4 holes here. Make sure you line those up. And you should saved all your washers and your 4 washers and your 4 nylon lock nuts. And then we'll get those put onto the bottom here. So by hand, put your washers and nuts back onto the bike, onto the bottom here of the seat. All right. Once you have them on by hand, you can grab your socket with the 10 millimeter. So you're going to tighten these two. Once you have them already on there, we're going to tighten these two right here. Now that your seat's on, you should be ready to ride. We checked it before, but we'll double check again. Turn the battery on. Turn the key. Make sure everything's working. Tip this. Looks good. All ready to ride now. Thank you for watching. And if you have any questions, you can go ahead and email or call customer support at Juice Bikes.